Thunder rolled over the coast and the mansion held its breath. A gun cracked once and marble kissed a falling crown. The chandelier hummed. The hallway smelled of cordite and citrus polish. Luca Marino walked in with steady feet and a shaking heart. He saw the body, the ring, the red bloom spreading like a map. His phone buzzed. A message glowed. It's done. The king is dead. Luca said, "Who sent this and why use my number?" Silence crawled along the walls. Dante Salvatore stared at nothing. A titan cut down. Luca said, "If this is a coup, it's sloppy. If it's a warning, it's elegant." Wind pressed rain against stained glass. Footsteps faded upstairs. A clock ticked and skipped a beat. Luca wanted truth, but he feared the price. He knelt, tasted iron in the air, and saw a smear that shaped an arrow toward the west wing. Elena Marino said, "Walk away, Luca." He looked up and found only shadows. The phone buzzed again. One more line appeared. "They know." The light flickered once, then twice, and a door eased open by itself. The rain softened, but the house kept whispering. Luca followed the arrow through a corridor of oil portraits that watched him pass. He heard the faint hum of servers behind the wall and the low throb of a generator fighting the storm. He needed answers before the morning turned this into a public execution. Sofia Ricci said, "The West Wing cameras were looped 10 minutes ago." She moved like a surgeon, cool and precise. Luca said, "Then someone stood here with a key and a clock. A draft carried the smell of cigarette smoke. Not new, old, trapped in velvet curtains. A single red fiber clung to a latch. Luca pocketed it. Steps echoed above, then stopped mid-pace. He pushed the door and found a narrow stairwell spiraling down. Darkness breathed up from below like a living thing. Elena Marino said, "Turn around, Luca." He shone his light and saw only dust, wire, and a mute camera eye. He took one step down. A phone vibrated somewhere in the dark. The stairwell spiraled into a bunker lined with old steel and new money. The air was colder, dry, and loud with fan noise. Hard drives blinked like distant cities. Luca said, "Someone hid a war down here." Sofia pried open a cabinet and found a neat row of passports, each with a different face and the same eyes. She said, "Offshore routes, 6 flags, 3 fronts." Luca's light caught a photo tacked to a corkboard. Victor's gala in Monaco, smiling with people who never smiled. In the corner, Nikolai Petrov stood like a wall. The smell of bleach told a fresh story. Elena's handwriting curved across a ledger, elegant and cruel. Luca said, "This isn't just a murder. It's a transfer." The server's hiccup. A screen woke, then dimmed, then showed a countdown. 90 seconds. His pulse matched the number. He reached for the power. A lock clicked behind him. A quiet voice said, "Leave it alone." The voice belonged to Nikolai, and the air seemed to tilt around him. He stepped from shadow with silent boots, eyes like slate. Luca said, "You picked a storm for this." Nikolai said, "Storms clean prints." Sofia slid between racks, her steps mapping exits. The countdown hit 60 and the fans sharpened their song. Luca said, "This network dies in 1 minute, unless I pull the spine." Nikolai watched the clock, not Luca. He said, "Let it die." The past is a disease. A siren chirped somewhere. Brief and cruel. The lights dipped and rose. Luca felt the old ache of duty and the new bite of doubt. He thought of Maya Carter, her laugh in a better room, a safer city. He grabbed a fiber bundle and paused. Elena's ledger lay open like a wound. He saw a name circled twice. His. Nikolai's hand lowered to his holster. The timer blinked to 30. A distant elevator began to move. The elevator dinged, and a hush fell over the machines. Footsteps tapped, measured, and sure. Elena emerged carrying an umbrella still wet, as if the storm had followed her inside. She smiled like a secret. Elena said, "Everyone keeps pulling threads. I wove the suit." Luca felt the floor shift under a truth he did not want. Sofia flicked her eyes to the countdown. 20 seconds. Luca said, "You looped the feeds and sent the text." Elena said, "I kept us alive." The ledger lay open on his name. The servers breathed out long and low. Rain drummed far above. Luca looked at Elena's hands. No tremor. "No grief," he said. "Who takes the throne?" Elena said, "You always were heavy with crowns." 10 seconds. 9. She held out a key card like a blade. Luca reached for it and saw the west wing door on a nearby monitor glide wide. A figure stepped through the dark. Sirens rose beyond the seawall, and the stairwell shook with a fresh surge of fear. Luca ran, breath-hot, boots drumming a warning down the wet concrete. Sofia said, "They cut the outer grid. We have minutes." The corridor lights strobed like a heartbeat. He wanted control, but terror leaked through his calm. Elena walked ahead, keycard raised, not looking back. Luca said, "You knew about the bunker. What else did you hide?" Elena said, "Enough to keep you breathing." A steel door groaned and rain hammered the courtyard. Footsteps multiplied in the dark like a crowd. Nikolai's voice echoed, "Put the key down." Muzzle flashes sparked near the hedges. Luca grabbed Elena's hand and pulled. They burst into the storm, and a black van peeled from the west drive. Its side doors slid open, and a gloved arm beckoned them inside. The van doors thudded shut, and the world softened to engine hum and wiper metronome. Steam rose from their coats and turned the cabin into a breath-clouded shelter. Sofia said, "I spoofed their plates. 10 streets, maybe less." Elena watched the rain trace lines on bulletproof glass. Luca said, "You sent the message that started this." Elena said, "It stopped a worse night." The van slowed, dipped under an overpass bright with sodium fog. For a moment, calm held thin and fragile. A St. Michael medallion swung from the mirror and tapped a quiet rhythm. Luca touched it and thought of choices waiting like blades. A radio burst with coded chatter and then died. He felt trust thinning, but a new street sign slid past and offered a name he had not heard in years. They reached a shuttered fish market near the docks, where gulls screamed like alarms. The bay wind cut through creaking signs and neon ghosts. A projector flickered on a salt-stained wall, throwing files and faces into cold light. Victor Orlov appeared in a recorded briefing, calm as winter. He named routes, judges, and bankers, all tied to a single crown. Elena said he was never just a rival. The clip showed Dante shaking Orlov's hand years ago, a bargain sealed with quiet smiles. Power sat in the room like a throne nobody could lift. Victor said, "Order is obedience," and the speakers hummed with control. Luca felt the floor tilt as old faith died. The final frame paused on a crest, split in two. A phone on the crate vibrated, and a new voice said, "Collect what he left, or be collected." They met Gabriel Stone in a chapel tucked behind rusted cranes where candles argued with the dark. The air smelled of wax and salt. Gabriel said, "Your father made promises to wolves." His voice moved slow like tides. He set an old ledger beside a cracked baptismal font. Luca said, "I don't want scripture. I want exits." Gabriel smiled with sadness. Exits become circles when maps lie. He pointed to entries written in two hands, Dante's and Elena's. Sofia read the margins and went quiet. Elena said, "We built a shield. It became a cage." Bell metal trembled once in the tower. Gabriel said, "Mercy and survival rarely share a roof." His eyes found Lucas. "Choose who you lose." Wind slipped under the door and pushed a single candle sideways, bending its flame toward a hidden alcove. Behind the alcove lay a safe wired to a timer that hummed like a trapped wasp. Sofia said, "Same countdown signature as the bunker." Luca felt fear flex and then hardened to resolve. He said, "We stop running." Elena said, "Or we vanish for good." The ledger code matched the medallion's edge, a circle within a cross. Luca turned the charm and the lock clicked like teeth. Inside, a drive and a list of names glowed in thin light. Orlov's network stitched across continents like a net. A single red tag marked Maya Carter at the center. Luca's breath stopped, then returned sharp and fast. The timer reset to 5 minutes without a touch. He closed his hand around the drive and chose motion over doubt. A distant engine roared outside, and headlights painted the chapel windows white. Dawn thinned the storm to a gray veil, and the city exhaled a tired calm. They hid in a warehouse loft that smelled of rope and old coffee. For an hour, danger felt far, like a story told by a stranger. A courier knocked with a coded rhythm that matched Dante's old habit. He carried soup, a phone, and a smile that did not reach his eyes. Luca thanked him and watched his hands shake. Elena said, "We buy an hour with nothing." Sofia traced routes on a paper map like threads on a loom. The soup steamed, gentle and human, and made the room feel almost safe. A forklift beeped outside, backing into silence. Phone lit by itself and showed a calendar invite from a ghost. The subject line said, "Family lunch." They ate in quiet and warmth worked like a spell. Elena said, "When we were kids, Dante hid his fear by planning every meal." Luca smiled despite the ache. He said he called it order. Sofia said, "Order is a story we tell ourselves." The room softened around them. Threads of sunrise slipped across the floor, drawing lines between shoes and shadows. The courier lingered by the door and coughed to be small. Luca asked his name. He said, "Evan," and looked down. Elena thanked him and pressed money in his palm. His pulse raced under her fingers. A spoon slipped, metal ringing like a note too clear. Luca's smile faded as he saw Evan check the clock twice. Evan left and silence tugged at the seams. Luca checked the soup lid and found a wafer-thin mic pressed under the rim. Control shifted away like a tide. He said, "We've been open since dawn." Elena's jaw tightened. She said he was scared of something worse than us. Sofia opened the phone calendar and found a path of invitations leading to a private estate. Orlov's crest blinked in the metadata like a signature. Power wrote the rules and erased footprints for sport. Luca said he wants us to arrive grateful. Elena said he wants us to arrive blind. A drone hummed outside the window and then slid away. They stood in the map's sharp light and measured the cost of truth. The invite timer ticked down from 60. They took the river road and reached the estate by noon, where lawns rolled like velvet under armed patience. The house wore calm like armor. Orlov waited in the glass pavilion, hands open, smile polite. He said, "Grief makes leaders honest." His guards stood still, eyes flat as slate. Elena said honesty is a rare currency. He gestured to a table set for 4. A fourth chair stood empty, napkin folded like a flag. Orlov said family lunch. The glass caught the sky and cut it into hard shapes. Luca felt rage and hunger fight inside his chest. Orlov leaned closer and whispered, "You bring me the drive. I give you your future." The napkin unfolded by itself, and beneath it lay a small remote with a single red key. Luca slid the drive halfway across the table and stopped. He said, "Proof buys safety, not loyalty." Orlov pressed the red key and a distant shutter opened. A live feed bloomed on a wall screen. Maya stood in a bare room with a chair and a light, unhurt but still. Orlov said, "She is my guest until we agree." Elena reached for Luca's arm and found his hand shaking. Sofia said he wired the choices. Orlov's smile thinned to a blade. Pick the throne or pick the fire. The feed zoomed and showed a tag at Maya's wrist, linked to the server signature. Luca felt the ground fall a little. He pulled the drive back and stood. The glass ceiling dimmed, and the doors locked with a calm click. The lunch ended, and the trap began to close. Silence fell after the locks clacked, heavy as snow on glass. The pavilion lights dimmed to a low hum, and the air smelled of rain and steel. Luca stood very still and listened to his own breath. Sofia said, "We're off their script for a minute." Elena watched the empty chair and pressed her lips thin. The feed of Maya froze, then looped, a ghost blinking in place. Luca gathered the shaken pieces of the night and set them in order. He replayed the message, the ring, the ledger, the key, and the medallion's bite. He said, "Every path Orlov showed us was clean on purpose." Elena said, "He wants us to see what he chooses." Outside, thunder rumbled like a slow drum. The glass gave back their reflections, taller and thinner, like strangers. In the shine, Luca saw a faint crest split by a hairline seam in the mirror wall, a seam shaped like a door. The seam pulled a memory loose. Luca smelled citrus polish and old smoke, and the seam slid backward. A dining room years ago, Dante laughing too loud at nothing. Orlov seated like a teacher, hands folded, voice soft. Dante said, "Order keeps blood off the carpet." Orlov said, "Order owns the carpet." The clink of ice marked each vow. Elena passed papers under a linen fold while a quartet played in the next room. Luca poured wine and pretended not to read the names. He felt pride that night, and a small shame that would not leave. The music slowed to a hush, and the smell of salt met the smell of ink. Back in the pavilion, the same perfume lingered near the glass seam. Sofia said, "He staged this with your history." Luca pressed the pane and felt a latch give. The past and present clicked together, and the door eased open. The hidden corridor ran cool and narrow, lined with muted monitors. In the center, Gabriel waited on a plain chair, hands folded like prayer. He looked older than the chapel hour. Luca said, "You knew this room." Gabriel said, "I knew the shape of it." The air hummed at a lower pitch, like a throat clearing before a hard word. Luca's heartbeat counted the spaces between lights. Gabriel held up a thin drive, the twin of the one in Luca's pocket. He said, "Two truths, one for display, one for pain." Elena stared at him as if seeing a stranger. Sofia said, "Who paid for the second truth?" Gabriel breathed in and paused. "Dante." The name landed like a dropped plate. The silence after was long and exact. Luca's palms went cold and dry at once. The reason for the game stepped closer, and the old man nodded toward a locked cabinet. The cabinet opened on a ledger of videos and favors, each stamped with a seal. Orlov's voice filled the room. Even though he stood in the pavilion beyond, he said, "Power is custody. I hold what others hide." He spoke like a judge and a priest in one breath. He did not shout. He did not need to. "Dante traded storms for harvests," Orlov said. "He kept your house dry because I built the dam." Elena closed her eyes as if light hurt. Luca said, "You killed to make peace." Orlov replied, "I curated risk." The words tilted the floor once more. Sofia whispered, "There is no clean wall left." Luca examined the labels and found one with his name from a night he wanted buried. Orlov's calm was a blade wrapped in silk. In that cold tone, law and crime became the same color. Luca felt the truth settle like a stone in deep water. He had spent years chasing a shadow that fed his family. He said, "So the mercy was a market." Gabriel said, "And the cost was you." Elena's voice was thin but steady. "We built the cage to stop a flood. Then we called it home. Sofia reached for Luca's shoulder and stopped short. The hum of the room softened, and the air cleared as if a window had opened somewhere far off. Luca let the shame stand beside the anger and did not look away. He said, "No more borrowed order." His voice sounded new to him, smaller and truer. He slipped his drive beside Gabriel's on the console. "We use the hard truth," he said, "and pay the price ourselves." A siren wailed outside the estate. The decision held. The corridor lights brightened by a shade, and the path forward took form. Footsteps gathered above like rain on tin. The air sharpened as if oxygen thinned. Luca counted the beats and matched his breath. Sofia said 30 seconds until they sweep. Elena tightened her coat and set her eyes on the exit. The lights flickered once, and the console ticked as files queued. Orlov's men formed a pattern on the lawn, dark chess pieces sliding into place. Luca said, "We walk to the pavilion and cut the throat of the feed in public." Elena said, "Then every loyal blade turns." He nodded. The corridor felt smaller with each breath, but his fear steadied into aim. The door latch was warm under his hand. The last meter stretched and held. The hum swelled. The moment stood ready, teeth bared, and then the latch gave. They stepped into glass and sky. Orlov turned without surprise. He said, "You found the spine." Luca said, "You built it on our names." The room tightened like a fist. Sofia lifted the transmitter, and the wall screens flickered. Orlov's guards raised their hands to earpieces. Elena said, "Release Maya and we burn the ledger clean." Orlov's smile did not move his eyes. "You will burn the city first," he said. The feed split into tiles showing judges, bankers, and ships. Luca felt heat rise in his neck. He said, "Then we cut your mask off and let the world choose." Orlov stepped closer and lowered his voice. "The world always chooses me." The screens began to flip. A crack sounded from the lawn, and a single shot took the air apart. The transmitter sparked in Sofia's hands. She hissed and held on. Another shot shattered a pane and sent glittering rain across the table. Gabriel stepped from the corridor with a steady gait and placed himself between Luca and the glass. He said, "Debt paid," and raised a small jammer. A third shot struck the device and threw him back a step. Luca caught his arm. Gabriel smiled the old chapel smile. "Stay brave," he said, and set the jammer on the floor. The hum shifted as outside signals dulled. Sofia's feed climbed back to life. Elena whispered, "Hold." The room inhaled together, grief and purpose in the same breath. Luca pushed the drive into the central port, and the pavilion screens bloomed with the second ledger. Orlov's face lost half a degree of calm. Fire alarms chirped as sprinklers primed but did not fall. The room was all light and breath and the soft click of data unlocking. Orlov said, "You trade your house for a headline." Luca said, "I trade a lie for a wound that heals." They circled the table, shadow crossing shadow. Elena moved to the remote and killed the locks. Doors sighed. Guards hesitated at the threshold in the glare. Orlov slipped a blade from his sleeve, neat and silver. Luca saw it and did not stop. They met in the center of the glass room, rain light on their faces, and the last distance vanished. The blade flashed once and rang off the table corner. Luca drove Orlov back and sent the weapon skidding. Alarms gave way to a wide quiet like surf under fog. On the screens, names and numbers rolled into daylight and would not stop. Orlov looked smaller without the glass behind him. He said, "You killed your own peace." Luca said, "It was never peace." Elena stood with the remote and did nothing more. Sofia breathed hard, then steadied. The guards lowered their eyes and their guns together. Outside, sirens converged like weather. Luca stepped away from Orlov and faced the open doors. He heard his own heart slow. A single napkin lay on the floor, folded once. a white flag that meant nothing now. The alarm stopped and a thin quiet settled over the glass. Water ticked from shattered panes and made small rivers on the floor. Smoke thinned to a pale veil, gray and gentle. Luca stood with hands open and felt the ache in his ribs grow honest. He listened to his breath until it slowed. Sofia said, "The upload holds." Her voice was soft, like a coat laid over a wound. Elena walked the edge of the room and gathered a single shard, then let it fall. Outside, sirens drifted farther away, as if the city took a step back. The air smelled of rain and wire. A chair rocked once and came to rest. Luca looked at the empty screen where Maya had been a threat and a prayer. He felt the weight of every choice. He said, "We lost the house we knew." The word house tasted like ash and salt. They found a side room where the sound was smaller. A kettle clicked on and off without boiling. Luca sat on the step and watched dust float in a beam of light. His chest loosened, then pulled tight again. He let the night replay in short cuts. Dante's ring, Orlov's calm, Gabriel's thin smile as the shot rang. He felt guilt rise like tide, and then fall like a slow wave. Elena said, "You kept us alive." He heard the truth and also the cost. Sofia fixed a torn cable with steady hands that trembled after. Luca closed his eyes and saw a summer table, laughter and warm air, napkins folded like boats. The picture faded. The kettle stopped crying. He opened his eyes and nodded once. He said, "Life will go on, but not as before." The words did not comfort him, yet they fit. A medic team passed outside like ghosts and left a bandage kit. Luca stood in the doorway and felt time slow to a careful pace. On a small tablet, a secure line opened without a ring. Maya appeared in a low-light room, whole but pale. She said, "I saw the feed. I'm safe for now." Her voice was steady and thin at once. Luca said, "I am sorry I dragged you into the storm." She shook her head. "You dragged the storm into the light." Silence held them, long enough for breath to count. Sofia turned away to give the moment a wall. Elena looked down and folded the bandage once, twice, like a ritual. Maya said, "Do not come for me. Finish it." Forgiveness arrived without ceremony. Luca touched the screen and did not speak again. The line closed with a soft tone. Gabriel rested in a chair by the broken pane, a thin blanket over his lap. The medic tape on his sleeve showed clean lines. He smiled at Luca the way shorelight meets water. Gabriel said, "You listened when the house lied. That is rare." His voice carried the chapel bell, low and old. He held a small card that smelled of wax and salt. "Dante asked me to keep this until you chose yourself over the name." On the card was a single sentence written in a strong hand. It said, "Keep the door open and let the truth walk in." Luca read it twice and did not chase the tears back. Elena placed her hand on Gabriel's shoulder and left it there. Sofia breathed out a word that sounded like thanks. Luca's mouth curled, not quite a smile, but close. When the last report was filed and the screens went dark, the estate felt empty in a clean way. Luca walked the corridor toward the gates with slow steps. Grass bent under a mild wind and did not complain. He thought of the ledger, the drive, and the map that used to be his world. He did not hate the map now. He understood it. Elena said, "We can leave the city for a while." He nodded and felt the idea pass through him like light. Sofia said, "The files live in the open. They do not need us to stand guard." Luca stopped at the threshold and looked back one last time. He said, "No more borrowed order." The words landed soft and stayed. He stepped through the gate and chose the road that had no crown at the end. Morning found the harbor with a flat silver face. Cranes stood still like tall prayers. The water lapped with small sounds that asked for nothing. Luca sat on a low pier and watched a gull draw circles in slow air. He let silence hold the story for him. Elena said, "You look lighter," he said. I feel the weight in the right place now. A bell rang far off and faded. Sofia walked the pier and did not hurry. The city behind them was softer, edges blurred by mist. Names had gone out to the world, and the world had answered in its own time. Luca thought of Dante and the word order, and the way it broke under a true light. He traced the grain of the wood and felt the cut marks under his fingers. He knew what was gone. He also knew what stayed. They walked the seawall where the storm once shouted. Shoes clicked in a friendly rhythm. Luca carried a small box that held the signet ring in the broken remote. He said, "We end a chapter." Elena said, "We do not end the book." A buoy bell chimed and then fell quiet. Sofia opened a public terminal and sent a final checksum to lock the files in open light. The screen blinked green, modest and sure. Luca dropped the remote into a steel bin and set the ring on the rail for a breath. He looked at it as if it might answer. It did not. He closed the box without drama. They turned as one and kept moving. The wind smelled clean, like wet stone and early fruit. Their steps grew softer as the city woke. Back at the loft, a small speaker played a voice they all knew. Gabriel recorded it before the estate, calm and clear. Gabriel said, "If you hear this, then you did what fear told you not to do." The room held the words like hands. He spoke of doors and light and names that do not own us. He did not preach. He remembered a night of salt wind and a promise that felt like air. Luca stood by the window and let the message sit inside his chest. Elena closed her eyes and saw the chapel flame bend and point the way. Sofia set the recorder down and placed a palm on it, as if to bless it. The voice ended with a quiet smile you could hear. "Keep the door open," Gabriel said. The speaker clicked and went to a small, kind silence. Days passed in small pieces. The city learned new rhythms. Trucks rolled with less hurry. Markets opened earlier and closed on time. Names kept falling from power like leaves without sound. Luca helped an old dockman lift a crate and felt his back complain in a human way. Elena filed papers that made their travel clean. Sofia taught a young clerk how to lock a server with a single public key. They spoke little and meant all of it. The sky wore a clearer blue. At night, gulls slept on pilings like folded notes. Luca said, "Thank you" to no one and everyone. The words did not need an answer. He knew the world had turned a small degree. He could feel it in his bones. Night came gentle to the pier. The water held a thin path of moon. Luca stood alone with the box in his hands and listened to the world breathe. He opened it and touched the ring once, then set it on the wood and stepped back. He said, "Truth must never be owned." The words fell into the dark and glowed inside him. A phone rang far away and then stopped. He smiled without showing teeth and turned toward the road. His steps were easy. He did not look back. The tide shifted and made a soft promise. The scene held still for one long beat and then let go.